The first thing I want to go over is the stance, okay? And golf, contrary to what some people believe, is a sport. It's an athletic motion, right? So when we take our stance, it's like any other sport that you might have played in your life. If I'm like this, I'm a quarterback. If I'm like this, I'm a shortstop. I'm in an athletic position, okay? So when we take our stance, picture when you're standing there at the ball, picture if somebody comes over and gives you a little push, you're not leaning one way or another, you're balanced. You're balanced both left and right, and you're balanced front and back as well, okay? We're not on our heels, we're not leaning towards our toes, and we're not leaning left or right, okay? With that in mind, let's kind of give us a little step-by-step. We want feet shoulder width apart, and when you hear feet shoulder width apart, I'm talking, generally speaking, the insides of my feet are even with the outsides of my shoulders, okay? So, needless to say, if you're too narrow, you're wobbly, you might fall over. If you're too wide, what you're doing is you're restricting your rotation, you're restricting motion, okay? So somewhere in the middle, we want to be balanced, feet shoulder width apart, okay? So if we stand straight up and down like this, and we get our feet shoulder width apart, get your feet nice and balanced, give it a little knee flex. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this club with the right hand, hold it in grip like this. We're going to take it up over our head, and we're going to press it right along our spine against our tailbone, like this with our left hand. Can you feel that? Just let it run right along your spine. Feel it? It should run the whole way down your spine. When we take our stance, we want our feet shoulder width apart, and this is how it feels. When we take our stance, we don't want our spine curved like this. I don't want to into the ball like this, right? That's not very this. We want a nice straight spine, because the spine is the axis that we're rotating around when we make this motion, okay? So with that in mind, let's feel this club running along our spine, feet shoulder width apart, good knee flex. What we're going to do is just bow forward, and as we bow forward, you can feel your tailbone moving backward as your sternum, as your shoulders and everything are moving forward, because we want to keep our balance on the middle of our feet there, right? Everybody feel how that works? I don't want you to be rigid. I don't want you to be uncomfortable. But understand too that this isn't good. Okay? So if you can feel this relative straight spine, it kind of feels like you're sticking your butt out a little bit. Okay? That's going to give us more mobility in terms of letting that rotation take place when we make our motion. Does that make sense? So all that, more complicated than you thought, huh? All that, stance, knee flex, bowing forward. Now without a club, with this bowing forward, if I just let my arms just dangle from my shoulders, as loose as can be, where they come together, that's where we hold the club. Right? So we're not like this, and we're not like this either. So we take that proper posture, that athletic stance, that athletic posture, and we bring that to the table with every golf shot we hit, no matter what club I put in your hand. Okay? Whether it's a driver, whether it's a wedge, every club in your hand, you bring that athletic posture to it. That being said, there's always the question, well, how far from the ball do I stand? Right? It's very easy. The club tells you. Okay? So when I set up to a driver, what I'll do is I'll set the club down behind the ball, and I'm going to, and I've done it a number of times, so I don't have to reverse all that, but I know that if I take that athletic posture and I let my arms hang from my shoulders, where they meet the handle of this club when the club is setting in the playing position, that's where I stand. So needless to say, the club's not moving, and I know this isn't my athletic posture, so I bring my athletic posture to where the grip tells me to stand. Okay? So with a shorter club, I lay the club down, and needless to say, I take that same posture and I move closer to the ball. Any questions about that? Pretty straightforward. But that posture is really important. People change their stance. They change their posture depending on the shots that they're trying to hit. All we're trying to do is be athletic over every one of these shots, every one of these full shots. Okay? The last component is alignment. And anybody who's been around the game at all kind of knows what I'm getting at here. This is the target line. This is what the ball sees. What we want to do is when we set this club down on the ground, we want it to set perpendicular to the target line. Okay? And when I say perpendicular, if you look at your club, a lot of folks will look at the top edge of this club. And if you line that top edge of the club up perpendicular to the target line, if you lay it down, the grooves of the club will be pointed at your right foot. Okay, so if you lay that club down on the ground in front of you, with your feet shoulder width apart, can you see the grooves of the club? If those grooves are pointed at your toe, the club is open. And if the grooves are pointed towards your right foot, the club is closed, the ball is going to go left. So as you're looking down at it, you can almost picture extending those lines towards your feet, and it ought to go right between your feet. Does that make sense? Is that news to anybody, or okay, cool.
What about the difference between a sand wedge versus a 2-iron?
Ball position changes, yes. Okay. But the way those grooves, we unless we're hitting a bunker shot in extenuating circumstances, we want those grooves pointed perpendicular to the target line, which means they're not pointed at either one of the toes. Right. Needless to say, if we have the ball forward, it's still perpendicular to the target line. We wouldn't exactly. Okay, so we lay the club down perpendicular to the target line. Okay, and when we take this athletic posture and we bring it to the handle of the club, what's important now to realize is what direction are we aiming? We want to know what direction this ball is going to go in, and it's important to have a process to get yourself aligned correctly when you're playing golf, and we could talk about that later. But generally speaking, if you take your ankles, your knees, your hips, and your shoulders, they need to be parallel to the direction that we want this ball to go in. Now, if you look at these lines on the ground, I've got it aimed at the leftmost pole out there, right? I've got the ball going at that leftmost pole. Can you see that? Take a peek back there, guys. It's sometimes an optical illusion. Okay, these are all parallel here, aren't they? Now, if this is all parallel, my body is not aimed at that pole, is it? It's actually a little bit left of that pole. It's called parallel left. If my body and the ball are aimed at that pole, then I've got converging lines. Okay? That's the mistake that most folks will make. They'll aim their body at the target and the club at the target, and they tend to hit everything right. Okay? Or they blame it on their swing, but it's actually the setup's fault. You know what I mean? So parallel left means that our body is actually left of the target line. And sometimes it's an optical illusion, especially when the target's very close, right? If you consider, if I take it to the extreme, if this is my target, if I aim my body at that target, I'm very, what we call closed here, right? I'm not parallel. So I would need to aim considerably left of that target to be parallel. Okay? So stance, guys, this is the foundation that we're making this motion around. Shoulder width apart, knee flex, good tilt of the spine, kind of feels like you're sticking your butt out. One thing I want to add to that, everybody hears this misconception, keep your head down. Watch this. What happens if I keep my head down? What happens to my spine? Right? The spine, at the top of my spine gets curved. Now if my head's down, I can't turn because my head gets in the way. Head up is actually a more appropriate expression, right? If I can feel my head against my shaft that's running along my spine, I know everything's aligned. Okay? So burying your head in your chest is not necessarily advisable. Okay? But get comfortable over it. You ought to be able to stand there for a while without getting achy. We're not trying to hold an awkward position. Athletic, comfortable, balanced, and aligned parallel left. You guys have any questions at all about any of this? No?
You put that clearer than anybody else has been able to explain it.
Good. There's more to it than
target every time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I try to hit the ball, and like you said, those lines are going to meet.
Right. If two things happen, if I set up closed, right, and I truly swing correctly, I might just hit a shot that goes straight to the right. But what happens over time, you figure it out. You miss to the right a bunch of times, right? You don't move this because you don't think of that. What you do is you start tinkering with your swing, right? And now your swing gets paralyzed because of a setup issue.
I guess my big question is how far of a bend is too much versus too little, where, the amount of bend from my knees and the amount of bend from my waist over.
That's a really good question. And I can make this as complicated or as simple as you'd like. Okay, we can get into this. All right.
Can you repeat the question for the camera?
Okay, we're talking about how much bend is necessary. Do we lean over a lot, even if we're straight, or do we lean over just a little? Okay. Okay. I've got a sand wedge and a driver in my hands. Okay. The driver, the shaft is much flatter, right? Which means the circle or the path that I'm swinging around is, if you picture the plane or like a plate that goes up through my body, in a good golf swing, the club will stay on that plate the whole way around, right? That plate is more horizontal than with this club. This shaft is more vertical. So the plate is a little more up and down, and each club is a little different length and a little bit different what we call lie angle. That being said, the spine is what we rotate around, right? So the plate is perpendicular to our spine. So with something like a wedge, we're closer to the ball. We're going to bow a little bit more to be looking at the ball. From back here with a driver, I don't bow as much. I'm swinging on a flatter. If you picture this as the axis, I'm on a flatter plane. Here, I'm on a little bit more inclined plane. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
From a technical standpoint, if you extend my spine, your spine angle should always be basically perpendicular to the shaft. Okay, that's a good way to think about it anyway. Right, so a driver's longer, it's flatter. So if we take it to the extreme, maybe you used a 20-foot driver, it would be like this, right? You'd be more erect. But a real short club, you'd be like this, you'd be a little more, you'd have to give it a little more knee flex. You still want to be balanced, you still want to be athletic, but that gets adjusted just slightly as you move through the bag. Okay. Really good question though, yeah. Anything else, guys? You want to get to it? Want to hit a few shots?
Yeah, let's work.
Cool.